President Barack Obama.
Mr. Obama got a wildly enthusiastic welcome at the University of Tampa, but he and the crowd turned somber when he talked about the economy.
1 in 10 Americans still can't find work. That's why creating jobs has to be our #1 priority in 2010.
The president used this town hall meeting to recycle many of the points he made last night in his State of the Union speech. But the point of the meeting and the trip was really to talk about high-speed rail.
There is no reason why other countries can build high-speed rail lines and we can't. And that's what's about to happen right here in Tampa.
The first leg, 84 miles, would connect Tampa to Orlando at a cost of $3.5 billion. It could be ready to go by 2014. A second leg, 207 miles long, would run between Orlando and Miami. Cost $8 billion.
Not only do I support it, but we're going to make it happen. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. I will have an opportunity to go to bat for South Florida to make sure that that second phase of high-speed rail connects Orlando to Miami. What I'm saying is,
why can't you use the SBA?
In the question and answer session, Mr. Obama fielded a wide range of questions and ended with a plea for civility and respect.
We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to listen to each other. We're going to have to be respectful of each other.
Well, can Democrats and Republicans actually set aside their differences to get something done on a variety of critical issues? Let us ask our guest this morning. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz represents the 20th Congressional District, which includes parts of western Broward County down to Aventura and Miami Beach. She's a rising star in the House Democratic leadership, thanks in large part to her close relationship with Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Congresswoman, great to have you come in. Good morning. And just for the record, let's note that we invited Senator George Lemieux and the 3 Republican House members in South Florida, and one reason or another they could not join us this morning, and I guess you scared them off.
oh, I'm just glad to be here.
No, I'm glad you're here too, and I do regret that they weren't here. I'm going to play devil's advocate for some of this, but yeah, first though, let's begin with something of the moment. There are, at this moment, several hundred Haitians who are being treated in South Florida hospitals. And many people would say, that's fine, we are saving these lives. Certainly hundreds of South Florida medical personnel have responded courageously, I'm sure you would agree, to go to Haiti. The question really is, will the federal government make a guarantee that they will some, part, or all of the cost, because it's going to run into the millions of dollars?
Well, I actually communicated with Secretary Kathleen Sebelius this morning and last night about this. I'm also very concerned about the halt, or the supposed halt, in transports of young children and badly injured Haitians to the United States. And we need to spread them around to hospitals so that the burden can be shared. Right. But we're going to be fighting very hard to make sure that the impact on Florida is relieved.
And did Secretary Sebelius give you some kind of an indication of what the administration's going to do?
She did. They are in the process of trying to sort it out. As you know, the situation in Haiti is very dire. There's literally not enough room to put the injured individuals that are there, and we're trying to rapidly set up hospitals on site so they don't have to be transported.
Right, and one of those hospitals is being run by the University of Miami Medical School and Dr. Barth Green.
Very proud of them.
And I think we all are. They're doing fabulous work, and Dr. Green this morning, in a report that we have, is saying this: if we don't get these people to the help they need only in hospitals, they're going to die.
No, that's right. I've been communicating by email with Dr. Green just about every day since he's been in Haiti, and we've been triaging with officials to try to make sure that we can get some of these some of this treatment broken through. Been pretty successful so far, but it's a very complex, devastating situation.
It is indeed. I would say, not to put too fine a point on it, that I was certainly here in 1980 when we had the Mario boat lift. Jimmy Carter said then, we open our hearts and our communities to Cubans who are fleeing, and of course then, by and large, he and his administration stuck South Florida with the bill. They really never paid for the huge expenses of that 125,000 people.
Well, this is a need for humanity. We have a need for humanity. We have 250,000 Haitian Americans in South Florida. Right. This is a very personal issue for us as South Floridians, and we need to make sure that first and foremost we extend our humanity, and second, we need to make sure we go to bat to make sure that we don't flip the entire bill.
All right. Let's move on to, I think, an issue that I hear about all the time, and I suspect when you're in your district here in South Florida, you hear about it too. Would you agree that most people in certainly South Florida, and I suspect the state and the country, are fed up with the gridlock in Washington over major issues because Republicans and Democrats just can't set aside some political ambition or whatever it is and sit down and reach some answers?
Well, I would differ with your characterization about who is unwilling to set aside their differences, because I don't know how many times President Obama has to extend the olive branch, reach his hand across the aisle. Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Reid have done the same, sat down in a bipartisan way on the Senate side with a bipartisan group of senators. We've attempted time and again to ask the Republicans to come to the table, but unfortunately, the Republicans still look at any success that we are able to accomplish in healthcare, in financial services reform, and turning the economy around, creating jobs, as a defeat for them. I mean, the stakes are very high, and as you saw in President Obama's conversation with the Republican conference the other day, I think it's unfortunate, but they don't want to see him be successful.
Well, when the president went to Baltimore and met with the Republican conference, the caucus, I thought that was a fascinating meeting. And yet, as I watched this back and forth, which got pretty tough at times, not disrespectful, but I thought pretty tough. And there you see the pictures of John Boehner, the House Minority Leader, greeting the president. What did that accomplish?
Well, what it accomplishes is it shows the American people that President Obama is and has been continuing to call for civility, for cooperation, for compromise, and that he welcomes their ideas. It's pretty clear that I think to Americans who it is that is willing to sit down at the table and compromise and negotiate, and who is continuing to stamp their foot and insist on it being their way.
Well, there is criticism on both sides, and the president, to his credit, said to the Republicans, look, my problems are not only on your side of the aisle, he's got problems on your side of the aisle. I mean, there are some Democrats, I don't know, Blue Dog Democrats, there's some others who oppose the president, and then there are people on the far left side of the party who think that, you know, the answer, at least on health care reform, let's say, over in the Senate, is just reconciliation, which simply means ram this through no matter what the Republicans say. They can vote no till the, cows come home and just go ahead and do it.
On the contrary, first of all, we need to make sure that we get back to what the founding fathers intended in terms of creating public policy in America, and that's passing things with a majority. There is no such thing as a standard rule where everything has to pass the Senate with 60 votes. That's a supermajority. In America, we pass legislation with 50% plus one. That's what reconciliation is. Reconciliation was used to pass the Bush tax cuts, to pass the major legislation in the Bush administration. It is consistently used. It's not extraordinary, and it's ultra-American. It's majority rules.
Well, I think we all believe in majority rule. I just, we wonder how it's working in Washington, but hold your thought. I know you have a response. So stay with us, and we'll be back with more questions for Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz in just a minute. This morning we are speaking with Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Weston, a Democrat. Let me ask you about President Obama, Congresswoman, for the last many months. Principally, he talks about many things. Principally, he was talking about health care reform and the State of the Union speech, and then later at the event in Tampa where you were in attendance. You know, it was 30 minutes before he got to health care reform. It was 30 minutes before he mentioned it in Washington, and he said it's not too late. Let's go ahead and pass something. What is going to pass?
Well, President Obama understood in the State of the Union that we need to redouble our efforts on focusing on job creation and turning the economy around. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or the stimulus bill passed last February, created or saved 2 million jobs already, will create millions more over the next number of months, made sure that first responders weren't laid off, and ensured that with the good news the other day that we've increased our gross domestic product by 5.6% in the fourth quarter.
There are a lot of positive signs positive signs in the economy, but of course, unemployment in the state of Florida is 11.8%.
It is
huge.
He acknowledged that we have a long way to go, and that's why his focus was laser-like in the State of the Union on jobs and the economy. But he also stressed, and we will continue to stress, that healthcare reform is essential and a key to making sure that we can bring costs down and stabilize the economy.
Speaker Pelosi late this week said if we can't pass our earlier version of healthcare reform, which the House did before the Senate, maybe we'll do some standalone measures, break it out into sort of smaller segments, and try to pass it that way. If you don't think that's a good idea, why not?
Well, we need to make sure that we pass the insurance reforms, like prohibiting insurance companies from denying people or dropping them for a pre-existing condition, making insurance portable, ensuring that we can we can get rid of lifetime and annual cap. But if you do those things by themselves without broadening the pool, broadening the number of people who are covered, then all you're going to have is insurance premiums go up. So we need the broadening so that we can bring costs down as well.
Forgive me for sort of jumping around, but I got to go back to this high-speed, this high-speed rail plan the president announced, and he brought with him as it were, metaphorically, a check for $1.25 billion. Heck of a lot of money to start that high-speed rail system. It eventually will cost the entire Florida plan over the next, 6-7 years, nearly $12 billion. Well, 1.25 is a nice down payment. What can you do to make sure that the rest of the money is there so that when they finally get to that Miami-Orlando leg of the system, it can be built?
The $13 billion total that was funded in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act for high-speed rail will include $5 billion that will be subject to appropriations over the next 5 years.
And you've got a say in that.
I have a little bit of a say in that since I chair an appropriations subcommittee, and I'll be rolling up my sleeves to fight to make sure that Orlando-Miami leg gets funded in the next few years.
All right. Let me ask you about President Obama. 1 year in, and I think that he gave himself a B+. I think when Oprah asked him, what kind of a grade would you give yourself? And he said a solid B+. Well, we understand why a president would give himself that grade no matter how well he did. I just get the feeling that a lot of people, including people who voted for the president, and the polls seem to reflect this, are disappointed. They still like him personally. His personal approval rating is high. 46% of the people in the state of Florida, according to the last poll I show, disagree with most of his policies. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is that we still have a long way to go in turning ourselves around from the worst economic downturn since Depression. And, people are really struggling and suffering. Remember, he inherited 2 wars. He inherited a economy that tanked.
They're his now.
They're his now.
He made Afghanistan his by saying, let's send another, 30,000 troops in there.
Right, because that's where the real battle and the real war against terrorism started, and where we need to make sure that after it withered on the vine when President Bush was in office, that we make sure that we really go after Al-Qaeda. And I support the president's position on that.
Congresswoman, here is Friday's New York Times, excellent column by David Brooks, their conservative columnist, and there's a little subhead here which is pretty good. It's what David Brooks wrote. God gave Obama an ego, he should use it. It's wonderful to have a president who has a degree of humility. I'm not saying that's not a good thing, but there are times when do you think the president should just stand up, or as he did to some of those Republican members of Congress in Baltimore, and simply say, hey, that's not it. That's not true. And don't say my plan is Bolshevism, which I thought was about the strongest moment I've seen from him in a long time.
I think you'll see President Obama using his bully pulpit quite aggressively in the next year. But I think most Americans, if you ask them, already believe there is plenty of ego thrown around Washington as it is, and injecting a little humility and balance to the massive egos that exist in Washington is probably a good thing. So we want him to use his bully pulpit because he's got that popularity, because he has the ideas that are important to move this country in a new direction. We're going to focus on turning this economy around, creating jobs, passing health care reform, creating green jobs through energy reform and climate change, and making sure that we can move this country in the direction people want it to go.
We will see if there are Republicans who want to sit down and reason with you and other Democrats.
I hope so. They're welcome to the table. They just can't have it all their way. Their way or the highway won't work.
Okay. Congresswoman, great to have you come in. Thank you very much. Have a good day. All right, up next we will open the mail.